Have you ever seen someone disappear in front of your very eyes? I'm not talking about that moment when your crush walks by, you glance away for just a sec, and poof, they're gone. I'm talking about actually seeing someone, and then right before your eyes, poof, they vanish into thin air. Well, that's exactly what happened to a man who vanished in the middle of a live TV interview. But how is that even possible? And where could he have gone? In this video, we'll take a deep dive into the case of Bruno Borges and what really happened to him. Let's get started. On August 23, 2014, journalist Monica Burial was sitting across from her guest, Bruno Rodriguez, on the set of the Brazilian talk show called Saia Justa. For those of you who don't speak Portuguese, Saia Justa translates to fair enough. Bruno was a politician and the Deputy Secretary of Public Security in Rio de Janeiro. He was on the set to discuss Operation Safe City Rio, which aimed to reduce violence and homicides in the state of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil by 2018. The show aired on a popular Brazilian TV network called Record TV. As the cameras rolled and the show began, Bruno sat calmly with his hands resting on the table. It was a seemingly normal interview until it wasn't. At one point during the interview, the topic turned to a controversial issue, and Bruno became animated. His hands started gesticulating wildly as he passionately expressed his opinion. During a commercial break, the host of the show, Claudia Weicker, decided to step out from behind the desk to be closer to Bruno, who was clearly becoming more and more agitated by the minute. She was going to give him a piece of paper so he could collect his thoughts and read some notes. That's when everything changed. As Monica stepped towards Bruno, she noticed something strange. He seemed to be shrinking in his seat as if he were trying to make himself smaller. It was at that moment that she saw Bruno's face turn pale. His eyes were wide with terror, and his mouth was open in a silent scream. Before Monica could react or say a word, Bruno's chair toppled over backwards and he disappeared. At first, Monica thought that there had been a cut in the broadcast and that Bruno had somehow slipped off camera. However, she soon realized that this was not the case. The camera crew quickly panned away from Bruno's empty chair to try to find him, but he was nowhere to be seen. This was no time to take a bathroom break. Where could he have possibly gone? Claudia looked frantically around the studio, but Bruno was nowhere to be found. Still, she knew that they couldn't just sit there and do nothing. So she told the cameraman to pan away from the empty chair, and then she looked back at the camera and said, "Where did he go? Where did he go?" These were the only words she said throughout the entire 12 minutes of the broadcast after Bruno mysteriously vanished. The camera crew looked everywhere, under the table, behind the curtains, in the dressing rooms, even in the bathrooms. But there was no sign of Bruno anywhere. Even after they tore apart the false wall in the set, they still couldn't find any trace of him. To add to the mystery, all the doors to the studio were locked from the inside and no one had seen him leave. After 12 long minutes of searching, they finally found Bruno slumped over in the bathroom, unconscious. They rushed him to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. An autopsy report revealed that Bruno had died from blunt force trauma after hitting his head on the floor. There were no signs of foul play, and all the evidence pointed to an unfortunate accident. But here's where things get interesting. Bruno's death was ruled as an accident, but his family wasn't convinced. They believed that he had been murdered, and that the people responsible had staged the scene to look like a suicide. After all, Bruno had been sitting in a chair in the studio, which would make it difficult for anyone to hang themselves. But the police didn't agree. They stood by their assessment that Bruno had accidentally fallen from the chair and hit his head on the floor. However, there were many unanswered questions. For example, how could Bruno have fallen backward off a chair without anyone seeing him fall? If he had fallen straight back and hit his head on the floor, then it would have made sense. But he fell backwards onto a carpeted area, not against a wall or another solid object that could have caused his fatal injuries. Also, why wasn't he breathing when the medical team arrived? Surely if he had fallen and hit his head, he would have been breathing, right? But in this case, he was completely unresponsive. Then there was the fact that Bruno had been sitting in a chair designed for women. How could such a large man fit into a small chair? Moreover, wouldn't the chair have broken under his weight if it was such a precarious situation? Then there was the fact that witnesses reported hearing a loud bang just before Bruno fell off the chair. But what could that noise have been if he hadn't been pushed or shoved? The theories about what really happened to Bruno began to spread. Some people believe that he was the victim of foul play and that someone had pushed him off the chair. Others believe that Bruno took his own life by jumping off the chair. However, this theory doesn't explain why he would jump off the chair in the first place. Perhaps he was trying to escape the interview. Maybe he felt trapped and cornered by the host, or maybe he was overwhelmed with anxiety and had a panic attack. But if that was the case, why would he have been sitting in a chair that was too small for him in the first place? What we do know is that Bruno had been suffering from depression and had recently attempted to take his own life. In fact, he had taken a large amount of pills the night before the interview. However, the toxicology report showed that he had not taken any of these pills during the interview. So why would he have been depressed? Well, Bruno had been under a lot of stress lately. He was being investigated for his role in a money laundering scheme involving drug dealers and prostitutes. On top of that, he was having marital problems and was recently separated from his wife. All of this could have contributed to his deteriorating mental health and ultimately led to his untimely demise. However, there are still some suspicious circumstances surrounding his death. For example, the security footage from the night before Bruno's death shows that someone entered the building where he was staying and exited shortly before he vanished. Who was this person, and what were they doing there? Was Bruno expecting someone to come and take his life? Or was this person involved in the investigation looking for Bruno? Unfortunately, we may never know the answer to these questions. In the end, Bruno's death was ruled as an accident, but there are still many unanswered questions. His family never accepted the official story of what happened to him, and they believe that he was murdered. The truth is, we may never know what really happened to Bruno. He will forever be the man who vanished in the middle of a live TV interview. What do you think really happened to Bruno? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.